Good evening and welcome to the October 13th Civil Service Commission meeting. Maybe I have roll call, please.
Commissioner Astorian,
Here.
Commissioner Hartunian,
Here.
Commissioner McCarley,
Present.
Chair Abkarian.
Here.
For the record, Commissioner Kazarian is absent.
Okay, what's next?
Minutes for the meeting of August 11, 2021.
I think that Mr. Astoria, Mr. Kazarian, and I were the only ones here, and because Mr. Kazarian is not here, Commissioner Kazarian, we probably will have to postpone that until when he comes in, and we can get that approved at that time.
For the minutes.
For the
of
11th. I'm sorry.
September 8th.
Let me just.
Yeah.
Uh,
The
August-
11th was problematic in August, but
Yeah, August 11th we can't do.
correct.
Because we have only two of us here. September 8th, we can actually get approved, so we get a
I'll move to approve, Move to
move to approve, there's a second. Minutes are approved with unanimous approval unless if I hear otherwise from Mr. Astorian, Commissioner Astorian. Minutes are approved. What's next?
Oral communications, we have none.
No communication, what's next?
Recruitment and examination report.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is our monthly recruitment and examination status report. This is, again, a report showing all of our current recruitment activity. Generally contains the job titles, the department, the types of exam, whether it's open, promotional, and the dates of any scheduled examination processes. As you can see, we have 2 pages amounting to approximately 60 recruitments at various stages right now. We seem to be holding steady at that amount, and each month we're completing these exams and creating lists, and we're getting new ones to do. So anyway, remains fairly busy at the moment, but it's good. We're showing good progress on filling our positions. If the commission has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Otherwise, this is a note and file
Mr.
item.
Chair, just a.
Commissioner McCarley,
Thank
go
you,
ahead,
Mr.
please.
Chair. Mr. Doyle, as to the number 1 recruitment activity for the deputy city manager with a close date, I believe, of December 11th last year, 2020, that is an accurate portrayal of activities related to the recruitment process for the deputy city manager?
Chair Carey and Commissioner McCarley, that is correct, and there's a good reason for that. That particular recruitment was begun really in the last days of the previous general manager for Glendale Water and Power, and the recruitment was he had retired at the end of the year, December, and city manager directed that we hold off on this recruitment until a new general manager for Glendale Water and Power would be appointed, and sort of get the lay of the land and understand the organization a little better. So at that point, it took quite a while to fill that position. An appointment was made, I believe, in June or July of this year. And again, the new general manager is still looking at the organization and trying to determine how best to organize it. But I anticipate a decision will be made on that moving forward very soon at this point.
Just procedurally, Mr. Doyle, does that mean that the original list of candidates that have so far gone through that application process, that list is canceled? And we'll restart the solicitation of candidates?
Commissioner McCarley, in all likelihood, no. We would probably leave off or proceed where we left off.
Lead off, or is there an expectation of reopening that list for additional candidates based upon the preferences of leadership?
Yeah, I don't believe so, and I think the most fair way to handle that would be to proceed as it had begun, not penalize or jeopardize anyone who had already gone through the process of applying and not requiring them to reapply. I understand your point, and there might be some merit to allowing new people to come in, but I think for the time being, the decision is just to, as this was put on hold at one point, once it has the approval to proceed, that we would just proceed as where we left off.
Without
Existing
invading
pool.
anybody's privacy and personal information, does that mean that we have a list now of candidates for that particular position?
That's correct. We have a list of applicants for it, but there was no examination process or anything had begun to that point.
Thank you.
That would have been my question, because if there was a list in 12/11/2020, then the list would expire on 12/11 of 2022.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
All right.
2 years.
Any other question? Mr. Astoria, any questions? Okay. Hearing none?
Thank you.
What's next?
Eligible list established.
Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, these are eligible lists that have been established since our last meeting. It's a pretty busy month, as you can see. We had a total of 17 lists that have been established in that month. 10 of them were open recruitment processes, and those typically are fairly labor-intensive with larger candidate pools. We had 5 that were promotional only, and then 2 that were promotional and open. Again, it's pretty significant activity over the past month. You see a lot of police department and other areas of our GWP and Public Works and such, but anyway, it seems like we're moving along and again, continuing relatively busy recruitment activity. So again, if you have questions on these, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Otherwise, this too is a note and file item.
Any questions? Mr. Doyle, the only thing, just to tell the staff, I sometimes I like to print and look at it and make marks, and even with my eye surgery, I really can't read it. So if you can just kind of go across, maybe the numbers will be a little bit bigger than just this. But thank you.
Mr. Chair, since you've initiated this close examination of the representation put in front of us, might I ask Mr. Doyle, at the very end, when I did focus to the extent of an older gentleman's acuity, ocular acuity, there's a date of October 13th, 2021. Does that represent formally the confirmation of the eligibility lists, or is that just inserted there because this is our first review?
This,
You see that 10/13/2021?
Yes.
What does that represent?
It represents the date that this report is brought to.
Okay, not necessarily the date when the list was examined and an eligible
That's correct. It's
list was
the
established.
column just to the left of there is
Okay.
when the list was actually established. And I do appreciate the commission's comments. We'll do our best to see if there's a way we can enlarge it a bit. The problem is this report started as a relatively short report with very few columns and
We keep adding columns.
well, I didn't want to lay it on the commission, but we've been asked to add some columns, so
You're
the
right. You're
more columns that
100%
are added, the smaller everything has gotten. But I'll see if what we can do to perhaps
Maybe just
condense.
if you
We-
just go
We don't
instead
want to, we don't want to do legal sized.
No.
Paper
Instead of
or
just
anything like
going, like, if you print like, if you can just go this way,
Well,
I think it will be, oh, yours is that one.
Mine is landscape
Ah, yours is
as opposed to
landscape,
portrait, so I'm not
Okay,
sure.
my printer probably, don't worry about it, it's fine. I'm sure we can manage. You're, no, I don't need you to give me one. If there was important information, I'm sure Mr. Doyle would have notified us. Okay, any other questions?
I have just a general question. I believe during the pandemic, the city was on at least semi-freeze of hiring. And I know we had relatively busy activity even during those times. I'm just wondering, are we officially out of that freeze or a semi-freeze, or are we still officially in that state?
Chair Kazarian, Commissioner Hartunian, we are still in a hiring freeze technically, and it's obviously as the economy is reopened and such, we're trying to bring back some level of normalcy, and we're nowhere near the same circumstances today as we were a year ago with declining revenues and things like that, which was what initially prompted the hiring freeze. But we are officially in a hiring freeze, and all that means is one additional step is required to proceed with these recruitments, and that's to get the approval of the city manager. And, you know, this may look like a lot of activity, but there are quite a number of vacant positions that have not been approved for consideration, or that departments have not requested to fill, with the understanding that, you know, our budget situation is still a little tenuous at this point.
Thank you, Mr.
Officially, we are still on freezing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see that Mr. Kazarian has joined us, so I just wanted to make sure that's on the record, that Mr. Kazarian is listening. Might not see the video of him, but he is joined us, and he is on the call with us. With that,
Chair, I'm in the car driving, so my video will be off.
no problem. Thank you, Mr. Kazarian, for joining us. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Who's next?
Job bulletin for approval, planner.
Ms. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a job bulletin for consideration by the commission for the position of planner. As you well know, we don't bring every job bulletin for commission approval, but under certain circumstances, we're required to do so under our rules. And in this case, this is a recruitment process that we had done promotionally in its previous recruitment iteration, and now the Department of Community Development is asking that it be done on an open basis. I think the report indicates that we have done, it looks like at least the last 2 recruitments for planner were done promotionally, and we have exhausted those lists fully. And therefore, and in spite of that, we still have vacancies to fill, and it appears multiple vacancies. So as a result, given that we think we've exhausted the internal candidate pool, we are now asking for an open process. With that, I do want to see if you have any questions on this. Russ Quan from my staff worked with community development on this item, and I believe we have Bradley Calvert, who's our Assistant Community Development Director, here as well, if you have questions. Mr. Chair.
Any questions on this?
Mr.
Chair,
Chair.
I do have a comment and a couple of questions, if you wouldn't mind.
Please, Commissioner Astorian, go ahead, please.
Under the minimum requirements portion of the report, you have listed, let me open it up. So under knowledge, skills, and abilities, knowledge of and a specialized familiarity with, and then you have a list, one of which is CEQA, or California Environmental Quality Act. May I suggest to be added to this list to be the Housing Accountability Act? If we are so brave to put CEQA in, definitely HAA should also be in it. That's the comment that I have. And then on the other skills, I believe, there is a language stating that assumes responsibility about some safety stuff, if I'm not wrong. And my question is this language to keep the environment or the work environment safety and so forth, safe and so forth, is this language standard in all of our recruitment lists or not?
Chair Kazarian, Commissioner Astorian, I'll probably ask Mr. Calvert to address your initial question, but as far as the language regarding safety, I believe you're referencing assume responsibility for maintaining a safe working environment, and that is a boilerplate language that we try to include on all of our jobs. Workplace safety is a huge issue, and a position like this, you may not think there are a lot of hazards, but in fact, there would be site visits and external visits to, I would assume, construction sites and things like that. And aside from that, again, workplace safety is the responsibility of every city employee. And this is a middle management position, and so there'd be responsibility for ensuring of that. The other
You said you meant angry architects coming in, and no, just kidding.
that too, or if you go to a public meeting and
Yeah, there you go.
get accosted by someone. But the question about the housing, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Astorian, I didn't hear it all. I'm hoping Mr. Calvert did hear it and is able to comment on your inquiry.
Yeah, that was, the comment was about Housing Accountability Act. It's part of the state law.
Yes,
Go ahead, please.
Commissioner Astorian. So we do include CEQA as part of that job description because that is a pretty vital component to anyone working at that planner level and the type of projects that they may be reviewing. As for the Housing Accountability Act, those are things that we do train our staff on, particularly when they work on any projects related to that. But because that's often legislation and rules that change on a pretty regular basis, as we've seen with some of the recent state or Senate bills that have gone through, those are things that we don't specifically call out in the description, but we do train our staff at those levels regarding those rules and regulations.
So HAA, or the Housing Accountability Act, was enacted in 1982 by then Governor Brown, and not Governor Brown, but in 1982. And then it was only changed once, and that was in 2017, I believe. You know, this, and I get it, I get what you mean by the training and so forth. HAA is part and parcel of the California state law, and it is equally important with CEQA, or as important as CEQA. My suggestion is to at least make a reference to that language, and I believe you when you tell me that you do train folks on it, but that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
So what's your, Mr. Astorian, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. If you can speak a little bit louder, I would appreciate it. So what is your suggestion, Mr. Astorian, and then we'll see if Mr. Calvert and the Human Resources.
So my suggestion is to add to the language, the way that, let me just bring it up. The current language states the following. Current planning functions, the California Environmental Quality Act, comma, the Permit Streamlining Act, et cetera, Why don't we add current planning functions, comma, the California Environmental Quality Act, comma, and the Housing Accountability Act, comma, and then continue on with the rest of the list.
Okay, I don't understand this area, so I don't know what to tell you except to ask Mr. Calvert if that change will make it more difficult for you to hire, or if it makes any changes. If it doesn't, if it clarifies something that you already do, I agree with Mr. Astorian that we just add it just to make it more descriptive, so to speak. I mean, I think that's what Commissioner Astorian is saying. But if it's going to cause some issues, then I would like to hear, I think Mr. Astorian would like to hear what you have to say on that, Mr. Calvert.
No, we don't see any particular issues. I would defer to those in human resources if that's something that can be added in at this time. But it doesn't negatively impact our recruitment process.
If I may follow up, if I could, Chair.
Mr. Astorian, if you don't mind, Commissioner McCarty is going to follow up with that as well.
I found my fellow Commissioner Astorian's comments quite on point, especially when we take the opportunity to review the planner supplemental questionnaire. And as I understand the recruitment process, a candidate will complete this questionnaire, and there are 4 questions that are problematic, and that would be the question regarding specific professional experience in developing plans, the second in developing corridor plans, and the third in developing design and design standards. Now, the suggestion from this questionnaire, at least from a superficial reading, is that if a candidate were to mark no as to, or as in the form of a response to one or all three of these questions, that candidate would be disqualified. And also, from that, I would imply as a candidate that the prerequisite experience, my professional experience, must cover each one of those different areas. And from personal experience, my part in the development process, there are individuals, even within this city, who have specific and identifiable expertise in these discrete areas, developing specific plans, or developing corridor plans, or developing design and design standards. This is not all the same. So is it the intent of this bulletin that those who respond must have expertise derived from experience, that minimum 4 years of qualifying experience plus a year at grad school, perhaps, in order to qualify to move forward in the recruitment process?
Chair Kazarian, Commissioner McCarley, the supplemental questions are such that some of them, as I understand, are absolute must-haves, and others may not be, or nice-to-haves, if I can put it that way. That's designed to assist us in assessing, the candidates' qualifications and preparation. And the interesting part is, when we post a bulletin like this and advertise, we never know specifically what we're going to get. We might get 10 applicants, we might get 100, we might get 300. And so the supplemental questions are a method of enabling us to screen to the best qualified, that best meet as many of those as possible.
Mr. Calvert, assuming that we were to direct that those 3 questions be removed from the bulletin, would that have detrimental impact on your recruitment process?
Very much so.
Why?
What we are looking for is a well-rounded candidate who has a background experience that can contribute to the creation of plans, the creation of development standards, current planning practices. Pretty much anyone who is going to be, well qualified if they have worked on a plan for a community that will include a corridor plan, that will also include development standards, that ensures that who we ultimately select is a well-rounded candidate who has seen the process through and not just touched a portion of it, which would probably leave them a little underqualified for this level of a planner position.
So in essence, if I hear you correctly, the prerequisite to applying for this particular position is that a candidate has to have suitable experience in each one of those areas, which I deem discrete areas of expertise in the urban planning curricula. You've really expanded the job requirements by saying that.
We do not treat them as discrete. They are all components, all contingent and dependent on one another. Each of them are a particular step in the process. So again, the goal is to make sure that we hire someone that has actually seen through plans, not just touched a portion of them, which would leave us at the detriment of other components of plans that we would need to create.
So following through with that, then, once again, that candidate must have, in order to be at the top of the qualification list, an understanding of corridor plans with experience in developing corridor plans.
Correct.
Okay, and continuing, he or she must have similar professional experience in developing specific plans. Now, specific plans, I would deem, if I understand the terminology, because there's no capital S on specific plans, you're talking about an identified area, for instance, like the South City of Glendale specific plan, which addresses developmental processes over the course of a couple of years?
That is correct.
Okay, fairly significant and high-level responsibility. Wouldn't you agree with me?
We are not asking someone to manage that project. We're asking someone who has worked on that project so that they are familiar with the approaches and what is necessary of that project. If you look at the South Glendale Community Plan, it also includes corridor plans, which were a component of that, and it also includes development standards. All of them kind of follow along with one another.
Okay, I'm just considering whether or not, do we have the authority? I might make a motion just to remove those particular designations from that questionnaire and to allow what we call gin text or free text, because question 4, or the one preceding it, is sufficient to garner the experience, and the experience can, of course, be solicited during the course of the interview and the examination process that you've provided. I'm just concerned that you have written this so tightly, and based upon the experience of other planners across this particular state, or even more limited, this locale, that you're excluding a good number of candidates by dramatically emphasizing the requirement of experience in 3, I'm going to say it again, discrete areas. So,
Okay, let me just add something really quick and see if that might answer some of the question. So Calvert, I'm reading on the experience says 4 years of increasingly responsible professional experience in a public planning agency or a private firm with direct experience on public planning, environmental, historic, transportation, or urban design architectural issues.
Chair,
Correct?
I'm Kazarian, I can't hear you. Can you speak up please a little louder, please?
I'm sorry, Mr. Kazarian, you said you couldn't hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you better. Yeah, I couldn't hear you until then. Go ahead.
Okay, what I said was that, I'll try to speak a little bit louder. The experience says 4 years of increasingly responsible professional experience in a public planning agency or a private firm with direct experience on public planning, environmental, historic, transportation, or urban design architectural issues. Previous professional working experience in developing specific plan, corridor plan, and design standard is desirable. So, forgetting the second paragraph, if you look at the first paragraph, somebody with that kind of an experience, would they also be able to qualify for number 4, 5, and 6?
fair question.
Because if they have that experience, the one that you said on top, which is the experience you require, I'm not looking at desirable, but the experience that you actually are telling people you require, somebody with that experience, would they be able to qualify for number 4, 5, and 6 of the questionnaire?
In 4, 5, and 6 would be, I'm sorry, I don't have
I'm
that.
sorry, specific plan, corridor plans, and design standards. With 4
Yes,
years of
absolutely.
Yes?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. If,
All right, then
if
I'm-
that's absolutely like yes, then I don't really see a big problem.
Yeah, the only thing is, I think you've resolved the issue, but it's certainly, the way I interpret it, Mr. Chair, is based upon Mr. Calvert's correct response, appreciated response, a motion to remove 4, 5, and 6 seems appropriate. It's superfluous, because you've gotten, just as you've identified to them, you've gotten to the essence of the job. And the essence of the job is clearly articulated in number 2. It's not going to be that terribly harmful, because the weeding out process is going to take place at the moment in time when there's both a written and the oral examination. So it's not going to be a detriment to the city. It's just bloody confusing.
Yeah, I just have an issue of when you get something extra from a candidate in their background, I always like to get it. Well, especially when I'm doing my work, I like to get some extra information. I don't know if you say NA to 4, 5, and 6, would that automatically prevent you from getting the job, Mr. Calvert?
Not necessarily, but what I would say is that just because someone has 4 or 5 years of experience doesn't mean they necessarily worked on the kind of work that we're asking for as part of these supplemental questions. You can
Then
be
why
a
wouldn't
planner
you-
in
then
another
why
city and
wouldn't
have
you-
different roles, responsibilities, and functions that could preclude you from working on a specific plan, which includes a corridor plan, which includes development standards. So this ensures that the type of planner that we are bringing in has actually done that kind of work in that role. Depending on what cities you go to, long range and current planning can be separate from one another. They can be mixed together. Those job descriptions, those job titles can have different things. That is why we have this kind of list of questions, to ensure that if someone gets in the door as a planner, they also get in the door because they have the necessary experience that we need to be able to execute the work that we're asked to do.
I don't know, it's just driving down to the specifics, because if we were to continue that, Mr. Calvert, and it sometimes concerns me about a lot of the job bulletins, that you have specifically tailored this job bulletin for somebody with a background in drafting specific plans. But my understanding of the series and classification is much broader than that. You're going to have planners that are working for you who have absolutely, and do work for you now, who have absolutely nothing to do with the development of specific plans. Isn't that right?
I'd actually say that's incorrect. Our staff works across many different fields, and they work with current planning and long-range planning. I would also say that we anticipate having several positions that are open, so the idea that we are tailoring this for a specific person is just absolutely incorrect.
And this is an open exam, not a promotional exam, correct?
That's correct.
That is correct.
That's why it's before you.
Yeah, it's an open exam, so couldn't be tailored to meet some specific, because it's open to everyone. Mr.
No, I understand that. I think what I'm addressing, and it's an interesting query, is whether or not this was designed specifically for a type of occupational skill. And if that's the case, then we just might as well call it a planner with a dash next to it. A planner for, let's say, urban specific or urban general planning, for that matter. You have a general plan, you submit the general plan to the state for compliance. Presumptively, I suppose you should put down that they have experience in crafting or injecting information into the general plan. Wouldn't that be the case? Mr. Calvert?
I'm sorry, what was that last part?
General plan, your understanding. You have responsibility for the injects and input and the modifications and amendment to the general plan, do you not? It's a statutory obligation. So would this particular individual also have to have that level of experience, or is that OJT?
They would not have to have it.
On the job
That's also
training.
not necessarily what's needed at this time.
Pardon me?
They would not have to have general plan experience. I mean, they would have to be familiar with it. There is no way that you could do a specific plan or a community
down
plan.
there, and then I'm just going to drop the issue. How are you going to get to the point where, if in fact you came forth and you required somebody as a planner in that series classification planner, how are you going to get to the person with whom or to whom you need the expertise in the development, modification, or amendment of the general plan? How are you going to
Anyone
write
who's
that?
worked on a community plan or a specific plan, those policies are rooted and are derived from the general plan itself. They would not be able to execute those plans without being familiar with the policies that shape and form that general plan. So the experience with that is inherent.
Is the same or similar?
Same or similar to,
Specific plan as a subset of the general plan?
its policies are derived from the direction of the general plan, yes. So to understand the development of a specific plan or a community plan, you would have to be familiar with and have to know the elements of a general plan.
Well, at the end of the day, it's been my position to support, even though I ask sometimes hard questions, because I have a viewpoint as to the streamlining of classifications. But that's a crusade that I might conduct in a different venue. But that said, I appreciate your comments. It's been forthright. They might differ from my own, but I support this job bulletin and will not move for any modification. And that is in support of the leadership of the city, to include yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Commissioner. I think that there might be one quick modification that we were discussing before this whole thing started, which was Mr. Asturian's modification, which I don't and we asked the question from Mr. Calvert, and Mr. Calvert said that adding that particular item would not actually cause any issues. So with that, Commissioner Asturian, do you want to go ahead and put the motion forward with the change, and then we'll see if there's a second, then we'll just go ahead and take a vote?
Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify what Chairman Kazarian asked earlier about 4, 5, and 6. If the candidate checks NA, does that automatically disqualify them?
Ms. Calvert?
Mr. Chair, I think Mr. Quan would like to say something on the subject.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Russ Quan, Senior Human Resource Analyst. So with regards to the questions number 4, 5, and 6, all three of those questions are considered desirable qualifications. So in the event that our applicant pool does not yield, let's say, individuals that have all three specialties, we are able to, focus in on other specific areas. So it's not necessarily an automatic disqualifier. The automatic candidates do need to have the minimum qualifications, which are 4 years of increasingly responsible professional experience, as well as having the bachelor's degree in a relevant field.
I just wanted to make sure that the desirable language under the experience does not contradict if somebody is automatically disqualified if they check NA under 4, 5, or 6.
No, that's correct. I mean, basically what would happen is if we'd had a large applicant pool and we needed to get down to a group that was, say, a size for which we can hold interviews for, then we would have to go towards those that have the most amount of experience.
Thank you, sir.
And not knowing how many you're going to get, you might get 3, and none of them have any of these 4, 5, or 6 experiences. Then you have to move to the next category of what would be the best fit if they don't have those. So we always think that there'll be a huge pool, and sometimes we get 3 or 2 even. So with that, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Astoria, you want to go ahead and amend and put it on a motion and amend the one section that you wanted to amend, please?
I'm happy to.
Thank you.
Happy to. So I will move that
And then tell us the section too, please, section.
You're referring to the amendment, right?
Yes.
Right. So I move to approve the job bulletin for as presented by the planning and the human resources with the amendment or with the addition of the language in section that deals with minimum requirements under knowledge, skills, and abilities to state that the knowledge of a specialized familiarity with current planning functions, insert Housing Accountability Act, comma, then the California Environmental Quality Act. That would be my motion.
Okay. Do we have a second on that motion?
That goes straight down the same problem.
I'll second it.
Okay. John Junior seconded the motion. Why don't we get a roll call on this?
Commissioner
I
Astoria,
know what you're concerned.
Yeah,
Yes.
what it is.
Commissioner Hartunian,
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley,
Abstain.
Commissioner Kazarian,
Yes.
Chair Karian.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Calvert. Okay, what's next?
Job bulletins, exceptional customer service.
Mr. Doyle.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. At our last meeting, Chair Kazarian, along with the support of Commissioner McCarley and other commissioners, asked staff to bring back an item which would help emphasize the city's exceptional customer service policy on our job bulletins. It was an interesting exercise, and certainly something we concur with. As a result, we had our recruitment staff do a little brainstorming and try to come up with some options for meeting this direction. I'd like to, at this point, have Ando Vardanian of our staff come forward. He prepared the report, and it appears we have 4 options for the commission's consideration on this subject. So, Ando.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Ando Vardanian, Human Resources Analyst.
Ms. Vardan, before you get started, I want to make sure that once this comes as exhibits, we don't actually say that we're actually not approving any bulletins. These are just options attached that we're going to just look at samples. Correct?
Correct. That's correct.
Ms. Vardan, go ahead.
Thank you. As you recall, at our September 8 meeting, Chair Kazarian and Commissioner McCarley requested the Human Resources Department explore some ways, some options where we can emphasize the importance of quality customer service on our job bulletins. Since September 8th, staff have met and we discussed some ways, we brainstormed, and we came up with 4 main options to present to you, and I'm here to present and describe what those options are and help you determine the best options for us. So without further ado, I'll just jump right in. Option A All customer service-related functions on the job bulletin have moved to the top of the respective category to increase exposure for the reader. So if you please turn to page 19 and 20, you will see that under the essential functions of the job, you will see the first sentence is with the red arrow. It says, ensures department services are provided with exceptional customer service and the highest level of ethical standards. So and then if you turn to page 20, you will see from top on line 4 where we have a strike on that same sentence, which means that we have moved all customer service related functions and responsibilities to the top of the respective category. That includes under the ability to, where it says provide exceptional customer service to those utilizing the GWP departmental services. That has also went up to the top. What this does is this allows the reader to read the customer service responsibilities and functions first before reading the rest of the essential functions. Option B, all customer service related functions are highlighted to increase exposure and visibility, but remain in their original order. If you please turn to page 23, you will see all customer service related functions and responsibilities in bold with the red arrow. So what we did as another option is we allowed it to remain in the same order, but increase the exposure by highlighting the sentence. Mm-hmm. Option C, the following statement, with option C, we inserted a statement along with a link. So if you turn to page 27, under the notes section of the job bulletin, we inserted a small statement that represents our expectation. The statement reads as follows. The City of Glendale places a high importance on quality customer service and prides itself for the high level of services it provides by every employee of the organization. As employees of the City of Glendale, we are committed to providing our diverse community and each other with courteous, considerate, and personal attention. And we went ahead and provided a link to the exceptional customer service policy for the applicant and for the reader to click, familiarize themselves with our policies and our expectations as an applicant, as an employee. And option C actually happens to be my personal favorite. Option D is very similar to option C, except the location of the statement has changed. Instead of inserting the statement along with the link under the notes section, we went ahead and inserted it under the selection process with the same statement, with the same link. Now with that, why do I prefer personally option C? Because with option C, it's in the middle of the job bulletin and it has more exposure, where statements and languages at the bottom of the bulletin tend to get not so much exposure. So with that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Since you
Go ahead.
and I were the proposers of this study, where do we go? It's really a procedural question. Where do we go from here?
Commissioner McCarley, we have a difficulty hearing you if you can.
Oh, I'm
Who's gonna
sorry.
be very close to the mic?
That's true. I was advised,
We need
I
to just-
apologize to you, Commissioner Astorian. I was advised earlier of the necessity to get very close to the microphone. So with that, I was just asking the chair where we go from here. Is it in the form of a motion directing HR to modify all bulletins, for instance, if we were to support option C, for instance, and to require that the insertion of that particular statement about exceptional customer service policy conform with the outline given to us by you tonight, for instance, C. Now, it could be that nobody but I agree with you. But on the other hand, that might be the way forward.
Yeah, I think that the way it would work out would be once the discussion is over, that we would basically.
I'm sorry, I can't hear, guys. Chair,
Mr. Kazarian, I'm trying to, I've gotten as close to the mic as I possibly can without, I'm so
Okay.
sorry about that. I'm getting as close as I can to it.
Okay,
I think
all
that the way that the process is going to work is that we're going to first have a discussion. Once the discussion is over, we would entertain a motion to either take one or all or a combination of all, and then we'll direct the human resources to include that option in all future bulletins. That's my understanding, correct, Mr. Stowe?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So with that, Mr. Kazarian, Mr. Asturian, anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I have,
Yeah, but go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Commissioner Kazarian, please.
thank you. I heard all of the options. If I understood correctly, option A spoke about having it be at the beginning of the job bulletin rather than in the middle, in order to be the first thing that draws the attention of the reader. But when I heard the fact that the personal favorite of the presenter is option C, I liked option C in terms of the fact that I believe, as I understood it, it had a link that would take you somewhere. And if that's the case, but it's not in the beginning of the job bulletin, my question to the presenter is, can it be option A with the option C?
Commissioner
Bells and
Kazarian,
whistles and the
yes,
link that takes you to
it's a possibility, but one
That
thing,
way you can get.
one thing I would like to note, or we
Yeah.
would like to note, is we want to preserve
I'm sorry?
we want to preserve the standards of the job bulletins, and when I say this, I mean typically, most of the time, for the reader, it's almost always more important to read the technical aspects of the job bulletin and then read the customer service, the importance of customer service. So we don't want to throw off the applicant.
Yeah.
So we don't want to
I
throw
agree
off the
with you.
applicant. Let's say it's an engineer position. You don't want to immediately jump in and talk about customer service. You want to talk about the job and then talk about customer service. That's my personal opinion. So therefore, I believe, my personal opinion is best to do it there. But of course, it's up to commission's discussion and review.
Keeping in mind that this whole item or presentation is based upon the desire of the commission, the chair of the commission, which I appreciate you having done through the length, through the extent of providing various options, barring any different perspectives from my colleagues at the appropriate time, Chair Kazarian, you can consider me having as ready to make a motion for option C, unless there's something that you or my colleagues think is a more appropriate option to satisfy the concerns which caused you and the commission to seek this presentation in the first place. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see if there's any more other discussion, Mr. Kazarian, and then I'll definitely come back to you on that. Sartonian?
Just a comment. I was sort of along the same lines as Commissioner Kazarian, because we took a close look at this and wanted to emphasize. I like option A because it highlights and brings it up, but I also like a little bit of additional background and the link that option C provides. But I also understand Mr. Vardanyan's viewpoint that we want to highlight the technical aspects of the job, but that was always the case, and hence we wanted to also highlight the exceptional customer service. So if at all possible, I would somehow, if there is a way to combine option A and C, and it's not a,
That's,
and it's not a big deviation from the standards.
It's not.
That's sort of because I see option A as starting off, hitting it strong, and then when they get to the notes, it emphasizes again and gives them the additional opportunity
Right.
to go through the link.
that was that would have been my recommendation as well, that we combine A and C. I know it's a lot of repetition of the same thing, but I think that it really emphasizes that customer service is job number one on everything in the city, because you're serving the citizens. So I personally agree with Mr. Artunian that we should have A and C combined. I like C, and I love what you've done to it. I appreciate the amount of time that you took just to kind of put this together, because it might not look like it's important to others, but I think when it comes time to somebody being in front of somebody, a new hiree, and they understanding that this is something that we emphasize 3 or 4 times in a bulletin, I think they would appreciate. So, Mr. Kazarian, if you don't mind, if you can maybe amend your motion that a combination of A and C combined would be something that we would look for. If that's your motion, then we can take that motion.
I incorporate what you just stated for the record.
Yes.
Okay, my understanding is
Whatever
that
you
Mr. Kazarian just did a motion to, we couldn't hear you that well, Mr. Kazarian, because you were cutting off, but my understanding
I'm
is
sorry.
that you're going to combine more, option A and C and include that in all future job bulletins. Is that correct?
Yes, that was my initial wish based upon my initial inquiry. If that is agreeable to us, to the rest of our commissioners, that would be my amended motion.
All right, you get a second, so long as I'm not cutting off my dearest chair, fellow commissioner, Mr. Astoria. He hasn't said anything.
Oh, that's
so-
right, that's right. I apologize, Mr. Astorian. I apologize. We sometimes this technology takes us somewhere that we don't want to go. So,
There for you.
Commissioner Astorian, please, if you have any comments, feel free.
Chair Karen, thank you very much, but I think you're going the right direction. And Commissioner Artunian Kazarian alluded to the link and the importance of it, and I'm all good with what was just suggested.
Okay, thank you so much, Commissioner
So I
Astorian.
have a second.
With that, we have a motion and a second. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Astoria,
Yes,
Commissioner Hartunian,
Yes.
Commissioner McCarley,
Yes.
Commissioner Kazarian,
Yes,
Chair Karen.
Yes. Thank you. And thank you, sir. That's a very, very
That's a
good
great
job.
job.
And it's a very
Thank you.
detailed.
Wonderful
Much
job.
Thank you, Mr.
appreciated.
Vardanian and Mr. Doyle.
And what's next?
Everybody else.
Reports?
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, I believe our only report is the late performance evaluations. And once again, we have a good report to share with you. One department has late performance evaluations, and all the rest have none. So
Great.
with that, this is a note and file. And again, I want to thank the commission for keeping us on our toes on this very subject. And I know it's it's sometimes a bit of a stressor to our operating departments getting these things in on time, but as you well know, it's an important thing, and again, it's good for the employee, it's good for the organization as a whole. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you. Otherwise, again, this is note and file.
Okay. Any questions? No questions. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Chair Karen, one more section.
Yes, go ahead.
Civil Service Commission staff comments.
Oh, I'm sorry. Any comments from the civil service
Yes.
commissioners? Yeah, Ms. Kazarian, go
yes.
ahead.
Okay.
Commissioner Kazarian, go
I
ahead,
just want
please.
to thank you. Can you hear me?
And we can hear you.
I want to take a moment and reflect on the fact that this is the first meeting where one of our dear colleagues, former commissioner, though no longer on the commission, but to me at least, and I dare say perhaps to the rest of us, a role model of a commissioner on the Civil Service Commission as well as other commissions is no longer with us, the late Art Devine, and if we can adjourn in his memory, I would be grateful. Thank you.
Incorporate that.
I agree, and our condolences to the family, and he was a incredible civil service commissioner, incredible human being for that matter. He was a good friend, and he will definitely be missed, and we'll adjourn with his name. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I leave this here? Do I give it to you?
Leave it there. Thank you.
All right.